Good evening. We're going to take a minute to just do a little bit of reorganization. So what we're going to do tonight is run a focus group with the board on the developing strategic plan, with the hope that we are gathering feedback that helps continue to inform and shape the work that is going on from our community. So you guys can feel free to join the table. So Dr. Ahmed and Dr. Atkinson-Duina are going to be taking notes. Because we're running this as a focus group, this is not intended to be a typical progress monitoring where you're directing questions here, but instead it's really an opportunity for us all to engage in a dialogue about where we are at. So just give me a second and I'll pull it up and then we'll get started.
And I will just add that because I'm part of the committee and so is Mickey, I'll be pretty quiet because I've had a lot of opportunity to contribute to this so far.
So as we get started here, just a reminder of the work that we are doing around the strategic plan, right? So the strategic plan started in the listen and learn, where we gathered amount of data that created our organizational diagnostic. We are now in a spot where we have a steering committee of 16 community members that range from students to alumni to a principal, a teacher, members of the board, as Chair Lentz just mentioned, as well as parents, community members. It's a true cross-section of individuals that come together to help us identify both the priorities, the key initiatives, measures that we will use to measure success, as well as the key actions that we'll take. What you see up here is how we think about the different groups that have helped shape this plan, right? So at the top, you see our executive committee, that is our senior district leaders. I think of them as really, we're the folks that help put the pen to paper and to make sure that the plan is developed. We have the steering committee that I just addressed. They're really to help us make sure that we have a representative plan that meets the needs of the community. We have run focus groups. We're now in our second stage of focus groups. So we ran some in January, and then we're running a second set now. And the Board of Education, you guys at the end of the day will be asked to review and to approve the final plan. And so I anticipate that that will happen likely at our last meeting in March, but depending on how much that is taken up by budget, it may fall into April. And so that's where we're at on that. As you can see, here's the calendar that we have used throughout this year, starting this summer, and we are now in February. And in the February piece, we continue to engage focus groups and constituents on the emerging draft, and we gather recommendations, and that is what we're doing tonight. In February through the end of March, we will finalize the 5-year strategic plan. We will make sure there's an aligned fiscal year 25 budget, and we'll share broadly with the community and initiate a community engagement process. Friendly reminder that the strategic plan is really designed to address the organizational diagnostic that we got in October that highlighted both strengths and challenges that we need to address as a district. There were 3 big categories of data that helped inform that. So the first was around performance data analysis. That was really looking at how do our students perform and how do they perform on state tests as well as internal assessments. The second is we had an outside organization attuned visit classrooms and give us feedback on what they see happening in the classroom. And then the third is constituent perspective. So in July through October, there were opportunities for community members to participate in face-to-face listen and learn sessions. We had over 450 community members participate in that, as well as a survey that went out that asked community members about our strengths and our opportunities, where we had over 900 individuals participate. This is just a reminder that in the analysis, we identified several key strengths that we have. I have the highlights up on the board. You have seen these before, but I'm just putting this up here as a reminder so that as we go into the focus group around the strategic plan, you have these in mind as opportunities from which we can build on. At a high level, what these strengths said is that we're on the journey, that we have made progress in terms of continuing to build our equity work. We've made progress in making sure that our students have access to rigorous grade level material. and that our families feel welcome in our schools. The analysis also identified a number of gaps that we want to make sure that our developing or emerging strategic plan addresses. The first is that there continue to be gaps in student performance, depending on student demographics. The second is that we still have work to do on that equity journey to make sure that we're delivering on outcomes. The third is that we make sure that all students have access to grade level material in every class, every day. And then the third, fourth, and fifth, or the fourth, fifth, and sixth, really get at this question around what are our systems and practices that we have as a district that support our staff to feel like they can be successful and to flourish in this work. And I'm running through this because we've had an opportunity to discuss these before, but I just wanted to have this as a reminder in the back of your mind as we dive into the next piece. So as part of this process, the steering committee has identified 5 strategic priorities. These 5 priorities, if they were the ones that were finalized, would guide our work, with each one having a number of initiatives underneath them. So the first is equity and keeping equity at the center. The second is student achievement and making sure that we're enhancing academic excellence and equity. The third is whole student. This is making sure that in partnership with our community and our nonprofit partners, that we are supporting the whole student as we work to improve their academics. The fourth is people, that we truly are a great place to work where people feel like they can be successful and that they're supported to be successful, and that our staff are representative of the students that they have in class. And the last is systems. And this is really captured where it talks about streamlining operations for equity, efficiency, and accountability. So this is that our systems truly do support our academic work and don't hinder or distract from it. And so what we're going to do tonight as part of the focus group and getting feedback is I'm going to walk you through each of those priorities and the initiatives that are developing under them. And in each case, I'm going to take a couple of minutes to just quickly frame for you how the steering committee got to that priority and those initiatives, and then we'll do a whole group discussion. And in the whole group discussion, again, Dr. Ahmed and Dr. Atkins and Dweena will take notes for us, but we're really looking for you to answer 3 questions. What resonates? What questions do you have? Or concerns do you have? And then third, as we think about individuals getting ready to lead this work in our district, what would you recommend to those initiative leads for the design phase? So when they're in that first phase of thinking about this work, what do you want them to have on a piece of paper in front of them or in the back of their mind to make sure that it gets captured as part of the work? Questions on process. And I recognize this is the first focus group that we've done starting at 9:20, and so I appreciate you all going with it. So the first I'm going to actually read to you just to take a minute to put it into the space, and then we'll talk about it. So equity, keeping equity at the center. Portland Public Schools strives to be an anti-racist, inclusive district by vigilantly supporting each and every student's particular path to achieving their potential and rooting out systemic inequities. That's the key priority. On the left on this slide, you see what's been accomplished in the past 5 years. It's not meant to be exhaustive, but gives you a sense of where we're at so that we make sure that we don't think that we're starting from scratch, but that we're building off of. And so you can see it talk about, just as a quick highlight, that a number of our staff believe that we have advanced work in this area, that stakeholders feel like their views on schools as diverse and welcoming is present there, that we have an equity leaders cohort, right? And so you can see that there's a number of initiatives and work that have happened and are continuing to happen. There's also reasons why this continues to remain a priority. So there are inequitable outcomes that we experience across student subgroups and schools. Our high school students reported a sense of belonging that varied widely by student demographic. And then third, stakeholders believe that PPS should continue to emphasize and execute on its commitment to equity. And so that gives you a sense of where we've been and why we continue to be on this path. And on the next slide, you see the 4 initiatives that are highlighted within this. On the left is, again, that priority, and then you'll see initiative 1, 2, 3, and 4. The first initiative, develop and implement a plan to advance staff mindsets and cultural humility in support of equitable outcomes and experiences for our students and families. That is a initiative that would be in the design phase next year. And so that would be in the design phase. And then the others, 2, 3, and 4, are ones that come later in the 5-year plan. And so I want to pause there and get your feedback as a group about what resonates, what outstanding questions or concerns you have, and what work would you recommend to the initiative leads in this design phase?
Can you put it back on the screen, please?
Yeah, I'm not sure how I lost it. Seem to be having a Zoom technicality. And we're back. You do not need to answer all the questions.
Do you need me to ask people for questions and do the in-between, or can we just talk?
I think you should just talk.
Okay.
Oh,
So don't wait for me. Just if you have a thought, you can contribute and the note takers are ready.
okay. So, do I have to do that? We don't have to spend time on this if it's outside the scope of what you're looking for, but in terms of what resonated with me, the loudest, the previous slide, on the left-hand column, the universal access to pre-K, that I think I made a face involuntarily. It's a lottery and it's half days. So to me, that's not, like, we're not there yet. I understand we can't do everything on the following slide and also expand pre-K, but that was loud in my head. So.
Yeah, and I'm just so you know, just from like a process, I'm going to hold back from interjecting my comments into it because we want to capture the notes and make sure that we're adjusting as we go through this.
I guess I'll say that what I'm not really seeing is a metric system, like adopting some form of metric system to like measure where you are and where you're going in terms of like the equity goals. And I think it would help not duplicate certain efforts and not like, I guess, I don't know, like I think it would be a good way to like collect like continuous data on equity and just like know like last year this is where we are and this year this is how long we've come. Just like understanding the depth of like where we are versus where we have to go versus where we were. I think a metric system would be helpful in that space.
Yeah, and one of the things that we didn't frame, and so I appreciate that question. I think that's a really good point. One of the things that is a work that is happening concurrently to this, with the steering committee, with Attuned as our partner, with the executive team, is actually defining exactly that.
Okay.
And so we could look at outside of this, right? We really wanted feedback first on the initiatives. Does this feel like the right buckets of work?
Okay.
And then we do have 2 different levels of measures that we think about. And that we have a draft for that we could look at another time. The first is what we are calling like mission metrics,
Okay.
right? That is when we're successful with this, what does it look like 5 years from now? That is really outcome oriented, right? What does it mean to really be graduating students that are prepared and empowered? So what does graduation look like? What does test scores look like? What does achievement gap or equity gaps look like? And how are we actually measuring whether those are shrinking? And so we have the mission metrics, that's the 5-year success piece. And then for each initiative, we have measures that both tell us, are we implementing and doing it? And then second, is it having the impact that was desired? And so we do have that. We're not showing it to you tonight only because of like limited time.
Yep.
But I could show you both sort of like how these stage out as well as what's the draft of the measures.
Yeah, thank you.
And I appreciate what the first focus is, but something to what you were saying about measurable or not, whether you can, advance staff mindsets and read what staff are thinking and all, but it almost said that should be a constant through all. And I actually looked to number 4 as a measurable type thing that, that accelerate the outcomes so that we see the differences soon in what's happening with the students that need to have a more accelerated progress.
One thing I reacted to, I think, is more of an optics thing and how we sell this. And that is, and I realized this as I looked through more of the document, which is why I'm framing it as optics, but the notion of uneven academic outcomes as being an equity issue. It is, but it's not only an equity issue. And I think it should be clear as, as this document is shared and sold that maybe some way to preview that this issue comes up in other categories. It does. So I'm not worried, about the underlying rationale here. It's more about what does this look like to someone who's just, tuning in for a snapshot.
And I would just say as a little bit of context that there's been lots of conversation about whether equity should have been its own bucket or if is it just interspersed in everything. And I think we kind of landed on like it's both and, right? It has its own bucket and like you'll see other equity initiatives within the other buckets. And I'm not using the right language.
No,
buckets and
I don't have any problem with how it's constructed. It's literally just this one piece. It could be something very simple that, just this is also appearing somewhere else.
The comment I have on what might recommend to the leads on the design phase on number 3 has to do with the multi-generation support for families. So many of the members of the student population K-12 often will have a parent or family member who might be in the adult ed program, and seeing that those connections are made strongly to help support both particularly in the multilingual situations, would be good. The other piece is something brought up about the pre-K program, and something to think about with how to make that more universal is the fact that it's, for a lot of people, it's childcare, and to acknowledge that so that we look at, yes, they are learning, but also this is something that might be going on while a parent or family member is working, and that there are places these people work that speak to wanting to help provide childcare, or that their workers don't get childcare for whatever reason. It's not available, and so they have a hard time hiring people. But there somehow is some kind of a coordination, association, not quite sure, with businesses that might help actually provide sites or help finance the pre-K program.
I think this is,
use your microphone. Yeah.
this has kind of been mentioned, but from a community, like looking at this, I think the initiatives are very, very broad, and looking at them and not knowing where we're starting and where our goal is to go can be very confusing, especially for people who may not speak English. I mean, even if you do understand, it's like but what are we doing? So I'd love to see if we could maybe add slides, and I know that's a lot of work, but have more detailed slides and examples maybe.
Yeah, no, we'll take that as feedback. One of the things that I think we as a steering committee have struggled with is really how to honor the idea that we don't want to create a 5-year plan with 95 action steps that 6 months later we're not implementing. And so one of the ways that we're thinking about it is how do you really honor the idea of taking the time with any initiative to really do that design work? Right. And so even if you look at this number 3, for example, where I don't know if my computer keeps going to sleep or what the deal is, but Zoom hates me today. But number 3 was around adult ed, right? And part of that design phase is really taking the time with both the adult ed community as well as other members of our community to look at what are best practices across the country that not only support the learner in that program, but recognizing that it's a 2-generational piece. Right, as I think Dr. Opperman said, that students who are in adult ed, their children in many cases are in our other classes, our other schools. And so really taking the time to do that. And I think if we try to put all of the work into it, at this point, what we'd end up doing is cheating ourselves from really taking the time to do that. And so I think what we have to do is really think about how do we articulate this idea of the design time, and honoring that and having that cross section of community come together to talk about the work and then launch it in each case. Should we move to the second one?
Yeah, I think so.
All right. Hopefully it'll stay on slightly longer for that one. The second one is around enhancing academic excellence and equity. Similar structure. On the left, you see the work that has happened over the last 5 years. And so you see work that's happened around instructional vision, the Wabanaki Studies curriculum, the high school redesign process, expanded access to pre-kindergarten programming, and some other initiatives. On the right, you can see why this remains a focus of work, right? So we've already talked about this, but the inequitable academic outcomes, the consistent access or lack of consistent access, how much our academic programming is really pushing students to engage in hard tasks. What are the systems that we have across the district that support our teachers and our students? And thinking about our multilingual students and our students with disabilities, building off of the presentation we had earlier today, remains an area of work. And so what you see here is a lot of content, and by far and away our most dense priority and number of initiatives. I just want to highlight what are the top 3 for a minute. So the first is around continuing to build the work that has happened around our English curriculum in the K-8 space. So that is presentations you've heard in the past around EL as well as CKLA. The second builds off of, I think, 2.5 today, which was the high school redesign process. And the third is around thinking about what we talked about in 2.1 or 2.2 around building the capacity of schools to support students with IEPs. And so that is work that would all be in either the design or continued development phase in next year. And then further below that are initiatives that would happen in years 2 and on. So same questions, what resonates, questions and concerns, and what work would you recommend? Good night.
Yeah, go for it.
I forgot.
I know, it's hard to lose the rules.
Very difficult. So in terms of a question or concern, I think both in, so the item around the number 3 and number 5, develop the capacity. Yes, but like, how do we do that? Seems like a really, really big question, particularly like our discussion about special services and like how, yeah, like we all acknowledge we need to do this and how do we do it? And so I would just, obviously, I'm sure that the entire team is very, very mindful of that, but it's what jumped out at me.
We're just jumping in or?
Yes, you're really just jumping in. I think we can do it.
Guys, you
I
guys were
think
like,
we
must have
can
been like
do
the
it.
best students
Also,
ever in school.
We can revert back
No,
if
no, no.
people can't handle this. I can.
I have no
Yeah,
doubt
okay,
the
go
member
ahead.
Brian was that student. I was not, but, yeah, I mean, the thing that just jumps off the paper to me is students do not yet have consistent access to grade level tasks and rigorous instruction like that is like alarm bells for me. And when I go down to the next slide about the focus, I think number one is supposed to be kind of that answer, but that's really word salady to me. So I guess this is one area where I'd love to see or hear, read, what is just a little more specificity about how that's being addressed. Like, I know what that says, but I don't know that that's really a satisfying answer at this point. Okay, so you're asking for gut reactions. That was my gut reaction to that one.
Tell me the one you said was the word salad. Sorry, for some reason I keep getting kicked off.
Yeah, no problem. Number one starts K to 5 and 6
Yep.
to 8 ELA, blah, blah, blah.
Blah, blah, blah.
That's when you know you've gotten to salad mode.
What else?
Question regarding on the first, the accomplishments and challenges slide. It says that students appear to cognitively engaged in less than 1/4 of classes. So how was cognitively engaged measured, I guess is my question. Like, how do we know?
Yeah, so that really gets at what's the task that students are being asked to do? And is the task that they're being asked to do at grade level? And are they actually engaged in it? Right? So if I am a teacher and I ask a question and I ask it rhetorically, so you don't have to answer it, right? That's one way that you get at. And so part of this is about how do you make it visible, what students are being asked to do. If you go into a classroom and they are being challenged to write a grade level essay doing some level of literary analysis, and you can look at what they're doing, that is a better indication than if you see students sitting back with the book down and not looking at it while the teacher talks. And so I think that cognitive engagement in that idea is like a fairly common piece in the education space that really gets at what do we see students doing, and are we seeing them do work that is at a grade level rigor? Can I just interrupt 1 second? Can you see if your computer will project? I can reshare the slides with you.
They're in Word docs too. You could go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to, as a community member, when I see equity, I want to know how that's being implemented. And I like, for example, I love that we want to develop the capacity of schools to provide more effective instructions to students with disabilities and English learning students. But what does that mean for everybody else as well? I think I would like more conversation in, okay, we are helping students at this level get to this level, but then what does that mean for other students who are not English learners? And how are we thinking about providing rigorous And sorry, I'm just thinking out loud. But how do we provide like education that is rigorous and relevant? And how do we prepare all students, regardless of identities, for a successful future after high school? And so I would like to see a working example of equity in each of our initiatives. For example, this is how it will look like in classes, and not just stated, this is what we want to accomplish, but how are we going to accomplish at least one example of what it would look like? Would be really helpful in seeing, yeah. Anyways.
My reaction to building deep knowledge of the adopted curricula for the student is that there's a lot of PD that is needed for teachers, and techs and all levels of people engaged with the students, and that this is, if it's going to be working in next year, we might need more work in the summertime. That's my reaction to that. My reaction to what you were saying is when, and because I understand what you're saying, getting deep engagement when there's a language barrier is very, very difficult. And a friend of mine who teaches at the university level, teaching public speaking, was saying the people that very intelligent, but when they went to say something and speak out loud, they have no inflection. So but when asked to say it in their native language, there was all sorts of inflection and all sorts of expression that was deeper and more. And so I get there's a level of understanding, which has to do with what we were talking earlier about the multilingual aspect, the dual language aspect of things that's really difficult, but how can that reality somehow come into play?
And I appreciate you saying that, because I think about how do we not just let the multilingual learner identity just overpower the other skills that students have developed over time. And so to focus on, okay, language is a barrier, but the student has the skills and can quickly, adapt to, let's say, math or music or dance or whatever. But to also focus on what the students are really good at, and not just talk about this is where they're lacking, this is where we need help, and not advancing them through high school or middle school or whatever, but really making sure that the language kind of catches up to the intelligence that the students are already coming with, and appreciating that intelligence of the student and not engaging with them in a way that's like, oh, you don't know anything. But it's English. I might speak 3 other languages, but how do we, basically that.
I know what you mean.
Yeah.
Can I just one piece that I would just add to what you just shared? I think that one of the things it highlights is the need to make sure that we don't look at each initiative in isolation of itself, right? That I think when the steering committee built it, they really thought about how does this all fit together to complement. And so the first initiative in equity is really around the idea of cultural mindset and cultural humility. And then here it is about making sure that all students have access to really rigorous. And so we don't get lost in that question of a language versus the ability to engage in the content. And so one of the challenges that I think we face and that other districts face is how do you maintain the bar, right? So instead of lowering who has access to algebra or saying that nobody has access to algebra, it's how do you support everybody to be ready for algebra? And I think that's a very different piece. And so I think that one of the things we have to be careful about is not look at these in isolation, but to think about how do they all fit together. Because when I have conversations with multilingual families as part of the focus groups and as part of the listen and learn, right? What they always said was we want more rigor. We want our students to be challenged more. We want more homework. We want you to recognize the journey that got them here and where we want them to be. And that's a piece around making sure that they have access to those pieces and having the humility to say that, well, I've been in education for 20 years. I've not been on the same journey that somebody else has, and to really understand from their perspective what their child needs and what we're trying to get at. And so I think that I would be careful about looking at them in isolation, because here, when we're talking about ELA, we know that somebody may be learning English in 8th grade, and they still have all of the cognitive abilities of any other 8th grader. And so we don't want to lose sight of that. And so we don't want to lower the bar. We want to instead think about how do we support students to access that. And I think that's very different, and why I think you have to think about each of the pieces in combination as opposed to in isolation. Because if we look at it in isolation, what we'll have here for initiative 1 is how do we do this? And how do we do this for a language learner and a student with an IEP and all of that pieces? And what we actually try to capture in lower down is how do we actually do these different initiatives for special education students or for students with IEPs for multilingual learners. And so we're trying to have it be a true Venn diagram and overlap instead of in individual columns.
Anything else on this priority?
It's a big one.
It is a big one. They're all big.
Yeah.
We've had lots of conversation about what is the right size for the strategic plan? Like, does it encompass everything that we're doing, or does it really focus us? And I think this is somewhere in between.
But this is the one I think the community is going to be measuring us on. You know, the ability to do what we're supposed to be doing in schools.
For the enrichment learning, I think that's really important, and I think it's a good opportunity for some of the achievement gaps to be met. I would just encourage going outside of just arts, computer science, and world languages, and to extending it onto, I guess, everything from cooking to outdoor activities, or even expeditionary learning, because I know there's a lot of, or I went to Outward Bound when I was at Deering High School twice. So that was a expeditionary learning school that I appreciate until today. I think I still really hold a lot of memories from. So yeah, just expanding it to the outdoors, I guess.
Yeah, go ahead.
This makes me think, and I often think this, that we limit schooling to a period of days, a calendar, a time, and sometimes the things that happen outside of those times is more important, into wondering how we can expand the time, and we need a lot of money to provide more opportunities for all of the students and to do the scaffolding and things that happen in a asynchronous, is that the big word? Yeah.
It's a big one, yeah.
I actually think that's a great segue. So thank you for that. To the next one. And so, Aaron, if you can flip to the next one. The next one actually speaks to this question about how do we support the whole student in this work, and how do we do this in partnership and not just alone? And so this really recognizes that we have families as well as a very rich and diverse nonprofit community that is chomping at the bit to really partner with us in expanding the opportunities that students have. And so this is about making sure that we think about really expanding time and expanding opportunities and support for students. Want to go to the next slide? So again, here, I'm going to, just for time's sake, not read it to you, but you can see on the left where we have been on the journey, as well as why we want to continue to address the idea of whole child, and why we want to make sure that we have both a welcoming school community as well as one that provides them with opportunities that go beyond what you would typically see. And so here, this is one that I just want to highlight a couple of pieces. So the first is that the initiative that would continue next year and be in the design and sort of like review phase is around increasing the capacity of schools to create and implement whole school systems. So this is a continuation and a deepening of the work that's been happening around restorative justice, around SEL, and around school-wide systems. There's a couple other pieces that are captured here that have evolved as the steering committee has done the work. And so one of them that is talked about in number 3 is develop, pilot, and scale a community schools model. That really gets at going much further than just a common space, a pool, but really gets at what's the full wraparound services that we are providing in partnership with our school community, in partnership with our nonprofits, in partnership with others to expand the school day, where it's not just us, but we're the physical space, right? But we have partners that are tied into that work. The other piece to that is that number 6 gets to the questions that have come up a little bit around pre-K and kindergarten. And so we know that there will be work that we will be tackling as a district with changes that are coming to CDS. We also know that early childhood and early readiness for kindergarten is a huge indicator of future success. And so this is an area where we would continue and deepen our partnership with Connect Ed, Portland Connect Ed, which is a convener of nonprofits in this space and early childcare providers, as well as thinking about broadly, how do we make sure that all students have the opportunities before kindergarten so that they're ready when they get to us in kindergarten. And so that is a piece that was actually a hotly debated topic about where pre-K exists and how does it exist. And so it was done in partnership, recognizing that it would likely not be the work of Portland Public Schools alone, but would require our other partners to come to the table.
Ryan, I was just thinking, I'm not sure that we've talked about what's happening with CDS at the board level. Do you want to just give a 2 or 3 sentence?
I'm not sure I can give a full 2 to 3 sentence. The very abridged version, and we could go much deeper on it, is Maine, I think, is the only state where there is a state organization, CDS, I don't even know what the acronym is off the top of my head right now at 9:45, but it provides early intervention and support for students before kindergarten. The state is looking to end that model and go to what you would typically see in other states, where the local district is responsible for what we call child find, identifying students that need early intervention supports and then providing it. And so it will dramatically change the district's accountability and responsibility for our, birth to 4-year-old students. And so they're in the phase now where they are going through the legislative process to figure out exactly what will be the decision. There'll be an opportunity for districts to potentially be early implementers, and for others to do it later in the process. And so we are still exploring what is in the best interest of both Portland Public Schools as well as our residents in terms of whether to be an early adopter in that or to let it play out a little bit to see how it all shapes up. That's a piece of it.
Not just the pre-K population, it would be infants.
Yeah, I think it gets, this is where I'm speaking a little bit,
Okay.
Over my skis.
Yeah.
But in other states, it gets all the way down.
The specific thing to districts is the Part B, which is 3 and 4-year-olds.
3 or 4-year-olds. There you go. So yeah.
Pre-K.
Yeah, I mean, pre-K 3-year-old would be a little before pre-K, but yeah. Yep.
Thanks. I just think that's important context with this initiative. Okay, you ready for feedback?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so a thing that so I'm looking at this list and I'm thinking, well, obviously prioritization is complicated, but like if you bumped 4 up to the out of school time activities to feelings of motivation and inclusion, then perhaps maybe item 2 becomes slightly less of an issue. Like, are there ways to get ahead of emotional and mental health challenges that there's less of them to solve, and is one of those ways potentially to give kids things that help them feel better in other ways. But obviously, I want to do it all now, basically, is what I'm saying.
I think something that's like personally, I guess, missing for me is just for the whole student to be addressed and supported. Feel like some of the things that they're going through outside of school needs to have a space. Like racism, state of life, politics, just like all of the things that they're going to experience, depending on which type of student there are. I feel like there needs to be like, what are those called? Like, I don't know, maybe like yoga spaces or stress-inducing spaces where
Reducing.
yeah, not in.
I got
you. Definitely don't want to stress the children, but just places where they can go and feel safe and discuss, some of the things that aren't just like doing homework and, where they might be able to talk about some of the family issues or just like a safety space. We talked about this last year, but just the idea that especially a lot of immigrant kids are parenting themselves, and so between school and their house, they don't have a lot of space to like be within themselves. So maybe that's like prioritizing after school programs or creating more opportunities, like make it happen to where they can go to spaces and just like decompress and talk and stuff like that. But I think just more opportunities for students to be in community with each other.
I agree. I think the school day puts pressure on having to produce by June. In my experience, again, let's go back to teaching stuff, is that I've had students that weren't ready to learn what I was teaching them in November, picked it up in March, and if I could have had them till July, they would have been a whole lot less stressed out on the topic. And so my radical idea is to extend our educational system, not to have these gaps where people get lost or they get pressured into a particular period of time to produce. So it's a very radical idea, but it's one I would like to be thought of.
Anything else in this? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I had one. So one of the challenges mentioned is that students share a desire for more authentic opportunities to provide feedback. And it looks like the only initiative we have for that is student leadership opportunities. And I feel like there's a lot more we could be doing other than just student leadership for that. I think that's just one thing that we could do, but I think there's other ways to make it possible for them to have some kind of feedback in a safer manner. And we should look into that. I don't know what, but I think there's other ways.
Yeah, I think adding on to that, I think I saw on the equity part where y'all are thinking about doing work with stakeholder groups or affinity groups, and I know you have that for staff. And some schools have like BSUs and those type of clubs, but I think it would be interesting to see if they can develop like district-wide leadership groups like that, so then they can rely on each other to do, to take on the institution. Yeah, I think that would be helpful, you know.
I think I would like to see students encouraged to build community with amongst themselves, like, and some opportunities, funding to start, I don't know, like something that's not long term, but encourage students to identify an issue in the community and then be motivated and know that there are resources out there where they can apply for some scholarships to address an issue that they have noticed in school. Also, something that I'm very passionate about is student mentoring, and maybe school providing some kind of reward, for lack of a better term, like extra credit for mentoring a younger student or student who's having a hard time in class. So kind of making sure that there's a system where we all help each other, and we just don't wait for the school to bring in resources, but students are actively seeking out resources that make the school better for everybody.
A comment to it, board member Ellie said, during, or a shout out kind of, during actually does have a mentoring program that I was part of. It's seniors mentoring freshmen, and it's considered a capstone. So that's a great reason for kids to do it.
I just have one question, or just to understand more about how districts or schools partner with community partners. Is it usually like a teacher or that program would like go and do research on what community partners are there, depending on what they want? Or do we have like a list of community partners they like go look through depending on what they need? Like, what is it, them taking the initiative, or do we have a space they can go to just like, you know, pick a name in the bag, and then it's like, this is what they do and this is who they are?
So as part of the listen and learn, we had focus groups, particularly with nonprofits. And if you asked them that question, they would say yes.
Okay.
Right? Which is that it's all over the map. Right? So that there are cases where if you have a connection with a teacher on a personal level at one of the schools, that serves as a really good entry point. And you then have access to students at that school to be able to partner and provide support. And I mean that in like a really good way.
Yeah,
The challenge becomes when that teacher moves on
exactly. Yeah.
or does something different, it's not institutionalized. And so part of this work that really sits in this idea of, if we are having this initiative or this priority be one of we and one of the community, is really how do we set up a structure that allows for effective engagement that isn't based on whether or not you know somebody,
Yeah.
but really looking at what's actually the need in the school community, and then where are our nonprofits that are able to support. Part of that also is the fact that if you did a landscape analysis of the number of what I will call social agencies that are interested in supporting students, right, that are experiencing homelessness or experiencing grief or need additional counseling or support, there's a large number of them. And if we're able to actually effectively tap into that support, we will have more of an impact than if we try to just add additional social work capacity at the school level. We're going to run out of funding and the ability to staff for it. And so the question becomes like, how within this do we actually effectively partner? And that's a conversation we've been having with ConnectEd and other nonprofits around what does it look like when they are effective at partnering with us.
Okay. Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I think it would just be important to at least create a space where the nonprofits like can be, either it's on your website or something, and then like the service areas, so that one, the engagement and the relationship building can continue, but also teachers don't have to then go and like look on Google, and they can just go on the server and look up like which partner does what, and then like they're already affiliated with Portland Public Schools. It's an easy way for them to interact and just like move forward. And I think it's really good to put an emphasis on like utilizing their already, you know, centered services to do that work, rather than like having to duplicate the the work. Obviously, like there's case management, counseling and stuff like that. So yeah, I appreciate that.
Thank you.
One thing that I just wanted to bring is I don't know what our relationship is like with alumni, but kind of on the same note of encouraging students to see what's outside, to get motivated, I think alumni hold a really special place in that maybe we can have a stronger relationship. They can frequent the schools and just come and talk to students. Or there can be like a night where we invite a bunch of people that do so many different things and just expose students to what is available in the world and encourage different thinking, engagement with different groups, and just have a really good relationship with alumni who can provide some kind of opportunity for students to intern with them, like board member Rosado, who was interested in being a lawyer. Maybe we can have a lawyer, support him and just something like that, just to encourage students to think outside the box and connect with people and put faces to the opportunities and careers that are out there.
Thank you for the idea.
That one?
I only have a snide remark about producing more lawyers, so.
Yeah, she withdraws the statement. So let's push on to the next one.
How about nurse practitioners?
There we go.
Definitely.
The fourth one gets at a little bit of what we talked about earlier today when we were talking about some of the challenges that we face within our special education classrooms, is really around people and making sure that we're developing leaders, staff, organizational culture to be a employer of choice and a place where folks are excited and banging on our door to get in because people really love to work here. And on top of that, making sure that we're not just filling the seats, but we are filling our staff with folks that are representative of the communities that we serve and that are really impactful. Right? I think one of the challenges is when you're having a hard time filling certain positions, you fill it with whoever you can get. And we want to think about how do we make sure that we're filling it with the best possible candidate for our students. And so that is a piece of this. On the next slide, you can see again where we have been, as well as why we to work on this. Part of this is that we want to highlight that there has been work done to diversify our staff, and we have seen progress in that. And on the right side, we, on our surveys, have a low net promoter rate and a general consensus that folks would not recommend. And that is a hard reality that we need to face as we go through this strategic plan and to make sure we're fixing it. I'm thinking we need to look at HVAC in this building. And so if we go to the next slide, Erin, you can see that the initiatives that we're highlighting here, the focus for next year is around refining and implementing a shared vision for strong and inclusive staff culture where staff are valued, affirmed, effective, and supported. That's work that has started this year, but that is about really making sure that we have a strong staff culture, that we have values that drive our work, that we have ways that we make decisions that are transparent and open, and that staff are engaged in our work. And then what you see below it is how we think about recruitment, selection, and support, how we think about onboarding, so that we make sure that we're not only building our staff culture at that first stage when folks are joining us, but also how are we making sure that we set them up for success. And then last is how do we have improved systems to provide regular feedback and evaluation. That again is not the dirty word of evaluation, but is really the supportive word of evaluation to make sure that we're making sure that everybody is effective and able to do their job successfully.
I guess my question is in refining, implementing a shared vision, as in where is the vision coming from and what kind of buy-in there is throughout the staff.
Yeah, I'm not answering it. I'm just treating it as like
No, that's fine. I'm
feedback.
not expecting an
Um,
answer.
Yeah,
I'm not expecting an answer. But I think that's a question.
Yeah.
Be thought of.
and to push for whoever's the lead on this to really be thinking about that. Heard you. Yep.
Okay. I could go on staff forever and ever. Because if they're going, if enthusiastic, committed individuals to anything need the energy to do that. And that part of developing a culture is to see where is the energy coming from and where is it being drained, and to evaluate that. So I think whoever's going in this way is to really think about the input and output of energy and into the individuals.
I guess I'll use this point to go back to one of my hobby horses, and that's a proactive communication strategy. You know, part of wanting to come to a district is like the vibe you're getting from the media and other places you're getting information. It's not just the literal blocking and tackling, you know. So I mean, we've talked about it before, so I don't think I need to go on about it, but real proactive strategy to get the good news out.
And I agree with that. And it's not just staff, it's to have that positive attitude so that the whole community realizes how good things are. Because so we maintain our community.
You can move to the next one.
Let's do it. The fifth will resonate with folks that were here last year. The streamlining operations, a couple of things I just want to highlight around this. One is it's delivered around the use of streamlining. There's an elegance to simple, and there's an effectiveness to simple that gets lost in complex. So we want to make sure our systems are simple and effective. We want to make sure that they're also focused on equity and that there's an accountability that aligns to them. And there's clear accountability on what is the responsibility of the central office and what's the responsibility of the schools, so that we are in a position of what I would call mutual accountability that really gets at how do we all work effectively together, not in competition, and not in duplicity in its nature. And so we want to make sure of that. If you go to the next one, you can again see the work that has happened and the challenges. So I'm just going to leave it up for a second for you guys to skim it. And then if you go to the next slide, you can see the initiatives that sit under this. The first one that would actually be in the design and develop phase next year is the data infrastructure. So we had a presentation at the start of that, but it is really to supercharge that area and to make sure that we are in a spot where when board member Bilyeu says, how do you measure that you are being successful in this? We can tell you this is exactly how we measure it. We can show it to you, and that is available, and not just for us around the room right now, but that it's actually actionable for our teachers, our families, and our leaders. And so really thinking about that. The second piece gets at this idea of really clarifying. Right now, there's a lot of messiness between what is central office, what is schools, what is teacher, in terms of decision rights, and how do we all work together effectively for student outcomes. And so really thinking about that. That's the two that are focused on for next year. And then you can see that we continue the work around standard operating procedures and making sure that we have that simple elegance. We do have a piece here around multi-year transportation. And so that is looking at our current transportation model. It's looking at the 3 bell schedules. It's looking at who rides Metro, who doesn't ride Metro, where do we use contracted services, where do we not use contracted services. If it has 4 wheels, and maybe even if it has 2 wheels, it's talked about in number 4. And if it has more than, I guess, 4 wheels, I guess bus has more than that. And then the last one is one that's actually come up in a number of the spirit around this, which is around this idea of two-way communication. And I think Board Member Grant talked a little bit about this. But this is not just disseminating information, but this goes beyond that. This is about actually being able to take the feedback, make adjustments, and see a change in practice as a result of feedback that we get at all levels. And so that is the two-way communication piece that we're talking about here. Board Member Bryden, you look like you're ready.
Okay. I would advocate also 0 wheels, walking school bus, pedestrian, like it's kind of funny, but like, yes, also,
Yeah.
I think that should be part of the plan. In terms of simplicity, I'm not seeing necessarily where it would fit, but I'm hoping it fits somewhere. The simplicity around as we renegotiate our contracts, getting those to be they're just so complex. That I'm hoping it lands somewhere in here. And then the other thing that came to mind while you were talking, and I don't know why this didn't occur to me when the data presentation was happening, but how can we be mindful of the fact that not for nefarious reasons, but for human nature reasons, once you measure something and like data is available, like behavior changes to get at data outcomes that you want, even if you're like, just, it's going to happen. So like, how can we be mindful of that truth and make sure that we don't have unintended consequences because of it?
That actually is I don't want to take us too much down a sidetrack. But that actually very much aligns with part of the conversation that's happened at the steering committee level when we've talked about measures. Because one of the things around the final measures is it needs to be data that's available, right? And so in an ideal world, we would look at our graduates 5 years after they leave us to see if they're still being successful and on the trajectory we had them. That data doesn't exist for us or for any other district. And so it becomes a question of what's the data that's available. And to your point, because this has been one of the things that we've wrestled with, is how do we make sure that it doesn't cause us to value something or to act in a way that doesn't align with what we're actually trying to get at.
And I would also add, just because it occurred to me as you were saying that, what's the data? And then what are the incentives? You know, and so, because those sort of dovetail in interesting ways.
Just a new thought that's occurring to me as we're talking is about point 5, two-way communication strategies and systems to ensure families are informing the district's practices. Like, I just am wondering, like, should that also include students to then also get kind of like at what Board Member Ali was mentioning, that it's like not just about leadership, but it's about like actually just where students are at any moment being engaged. So I think that's worth thinking about. Everyone's getting loopy. We're almost done.
I was going to say, you should give that
Hang
feedback to a
in
member of
there.
the steering committee.
Yeah.
I know the foundation is doing, or they're starting to have a
Alumni network.
yeah, and I think that's a good start. Hopefully they donate money.
Yep.
Anything else here around systems? No?
So let's just talk from a process end, right? So with all of the focus groups, but certainly with yours as well, is we're taking the feedback, we are sharing it with Attuned, and we're sharing it with members of the steering committee. And so they're taking sort of the whole pile of feedback, and then they will make revisions. And pieces of it you will see pop up in here where we may adjust language to match up with it. And parts of it you will not see in here, but you will see on the sheet of paper that the lead uses as their starting spot, right? So when they have a lead identified and they're doing the design phase, you will see that. Just to give a quick preview, I guess I can't because I can't do it. I will put into our board update where you can see the initial draft of how these are phased out, right? So we talked about first year and then we talked about everything else, but we'll give it to you so you can see the whole piece of it. And I think we can also share with you at that time what is a early working draft of the measures. And that piece, I would like to have a further conversation to voice over exactly what Board Member Bryden was highlighting, that tension of having data that's readily available and not having it cause us to act in ways that don't align with what we intend. So that's how you'll see it. We will be giving an update on this for the whole community at next week's board presentation because our budget is getting aligned to this and this work. And so you will see it there, and then we'll come back to you for a final vote and approval of it. Likely, my gut is in early April, just based on the calendar of things. So thank you guys for that and for the time tonight. I don't know, Chair, if you want to do any other formal closing.
No, I don't think so. I think we're good. We don't have to adjourn